This video's purpose is to visually explain to you how outlining can help to improve your writing. For purposes of illustration, we will use our most recent prompt, how can one individual's actions make a difference in the course of human events? Any good writing has strong organization, as you have seen throughout your career so far at school. The most effective way to address a prompt thoroughly is to use an outline. That way you make sure you get all the points. By the end of this video, you should be able to create an outline on your own, modeling the thought processes on display here. Any and all outlines should start with an introduction, then move their way to the main ideas. Based on the discussion we've had in class, we'll use some examples like speech, violence, and invention, ending of course with a conclusion. Now, introductions and conclusions are kind of separate beasts to tame altogether, so we'll put them aside for now and just focus on developing our body paragraphs. That means we start with our number 2 support, speech. When planning an outline, we want to make sure we're using effective transitions, but also addressing the prompt. Now, note this paragraph is about how an individual can influence human events through speech. We're not talking about speech in general. So the best way to start our paragraph is to restate the prompt with a statement like, speech can change the world, or speech can allow an individual to influence the course of human events. First sentence done, cake. On to the next one. In class we spoke a great deal of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and some of you wrote me entire papers about Dr. King. As we've discussed in class though, our papers aren't about Dr. King. He's just helping us prove a point. 1 or 2 sentences about the good doctor will help us out plenty. I put a detail point here because I wanted to be sure that I mentioned the I have a dream speech, because it's clearly his most important. I want to talk about how Dr. King changed the world through speaking to masses of people and eventually helped to end segregation. Now, because I'm a good little English student, I want to throw in a sentence full of sensory detail to make Mr. Lay really happy. This time, I'm going to make a few notes to remind myself of the language that pops into my head as I'm planning. I know from listening to old clips of Dr. King that he had a very powerful voice, and I know that the word resonates is a good sensory word, so I want to use it to describe his speech. Next, I know that the speech was delivered on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and I want to demonstrate my knowledge of the event, so I'll note that here as well. Now, wait a minute. Why did I put a bullet on I have a dream and number out my sensory details? Well, because you only number a point if you have more than one. If there is only one point to be made under a topic, you use a bullet. Remember that in the future. Moving on, knowing that I need to use transitions, I want to round out my paragraph with a concluding sentence. Kind of like an introduction, these are easier to write once we've looked ahead a little. Let's take a look at our next topic and see if we can get a little help. We're going to talk about violence next. This is perfect because Dr. King was so opposed to violence. Now I can connect these 2 paragraphs very easily and I get bonus points for my essay having roundness. You can't beat that. Okay, so I'm going to change this to remind myself to talk about how Dr. King refused to use violence as a form of protest, and explain that sadly in the end it was violence that took Dr. King from this world. Now, when I move on to talk about violence, I can transition to my next paragraph by discussing how violence changes the world more quickly than speech, but with worse outcomes. Then I move on to my other paragraphs. Wash, rinse, repeat. We'll be talking about introductions and conclusions next week, so for now we'll focus on building strong body paragraphs with transitions. That's it for now. Reference this video anytime you need a refresher on how outlines work. Now, let's get out there and write.